exploring generational evolution in humanity. So this is speculative work based on my own conceptualized explanation of evolution I call generational evolution. To briefly summarize it, since it's been a while since I've talked about this, it is evolution predicated on the idea that all organisms have intelligence and intentions and a capacity for learning. Traits are shaped and learned behaviors taught from one generation to the next, rather than evolution explained through random genetic mutations and slow adaptations. Everything we've been able to gather on evolution suggests that it is a rapid process. Generational evolution fills in all the holes left by standard Darwinian and contemporary evolutionary theories, I think anyways. For example, animals like sharks and crocodiles and beetles that have species largely unchanged from fossils we've found dating back hundreds of millions of years ago. The inconsistency is that evolution seems to work only sometimes. There's no reason a drastically changing world over a few 100 million years shouldn't ever lead to changes within certain organisms. There is also the lack of transitory species, which is a common argument you'll hear, either for or against evolution. In generational evolution, both of these flaws are explained quite naturally. There's no real fossil or transitory or link species because evolution happens rapidly, as fast as 3 or more generations. So in the scope of the fossil record, that is a blink of an eye. This is why you can have a species like a beetle or a shark that evolves into one genus and stays like that indefinitely, with some families branching off. You can stay unchanged as a species because you choose to. There is no need or want to necessitate change to initiate an evolution. We're going to look at this in terms of humans, so that explanation will be fleshed out more as we go along in case you have questions. For an organism to change, there are 2 main factors: the microbiome of an organism and the intention of the organism itself. The physiology of the body can be shaped by the individual organism, and that training is taught generationally to the offspring, and that offspring grows up and teaches that in turn to its own offspring. What this looks like is you have that initial tribe or tribes of humans from Africa, and we're at the point where they leave to either different parts of Africa or to the other continents, some to Asia, Europe, the Americas, Australia, and so on. We're not concerned about the timings so much, so let's just say this all happens at once. We're just looking at the process right now. When you enter a new environment, introduce new foods, and use the body in different ways, it necessitates change. Linguistic studies reveal that the shape of the cranium and the jaw has a huge impact on your language and your capacity to learn a language. In my case, I can probably learn Arabic or Norwegian the best because I have Nordic and Lebanese ancestry. So that would be easier than trying to learn something like Mandarin or Italian, perhaps. And maybe I could even learn French easier because of the French colonial rule in Lebanon. Your face shapes your language, and your language shapes your face. This even applies to local dialects and accents. The very geography changes how you speak. Take the same language and put half the people on a hilly side of town and the other half on a flat side, and they will develop differently. This goes for tropical, dry, desert, humid, tundra, steppe. Any sort of terrain or climate can have long-term effects on a population or person to necessitate a change in language and the shape of the body, even if it's just subtle, to match that environment. That's why there are so many regional dialects and so many languages in general. If you think of all the Proto-Indo-European language descendants, the change in language probably occurred once a new place was settled, and the geography and way of life of the people rapidly changed that language, starting as a new dialect, and eventually as the culture developed and the language developed with it, and we have a new language born. And sure, that is more of a social development, but the factor of cranial evolution is there, so it is relevant, I think. Something as simple as settling and speaking a new language can, over time, change your skull and mouth as you shape it to speak the new words, or the same words in different ways. There are other physical differences between people from the various continents, all evolved through the necessity of change to suit their region better. Humans didn't evolve into different species on some accidental DNA change, nor did humans spend 100,000 years slowly changing from something like African to European or African to Asian. The changes happened fast, and I would predict within the first several generations of a newly settled tribe. Because this is what is happening. Your environment is drastically different. It's not DNA mutation or natural selections. It's physiological morphing. It's shape-shifting, so to speak. And it's microbial transformation. You're in a new place. The air is different. The temperature is different. The food is different. The topography is different. So your walk changes. You now need to consider your footing over a rocky and foresty area as opposed to, let's say, plains. You are walking in this new way and causing physical change to your muscular system and bone structure. Your toes are used in different ways, same with your knees and your back and your arms. It's all used to fit the environment better. But then you have a kid and he's raised to be in this environment from birth, following how you do things. Children and newborns have very malleable bones, and they are good at mimicking their caretaker, so they more easily shape their bodies to the environment. An example you can think about that runs along similar veins is the stereotype of immigrants coming to a new country, America as a common example. The first generation of parents speak primarily their native tongue and only learning broken English. The second generation speaks good English and can still speak the native tongue, so they were raised learning both. The third generation, however, usually can only speak broken native tongue or even just hear it, but fluent English. Now this is an example of generational evolution in and of itself, but it forms an easy to follow example just for picturing this on different physiological evolutionary changes. For humans, we can easily observe how the body changes and adapts within a couple of generations. This learned behavior necessitates change. The bone structure of the feet will change, the hands, the skull, the spine, the teeth, all the little adaptations that make us unique. We are still evolving our bodies, mostly negative right now, but it is happening. For example, shoes are beginning to change our feet, which has an impact on our legs and hips and spines. This is why most humans right now have back problems. We are walking improperly. It's not like we aren't meant to walk upright or can't support ourselves because of gravity or something like that. Whatever the arguments are, it's none of that. We're just not walking correctly. Most people can't walk properly given our biology. Shoes have exacerbated this issue, or maybe even caused it, because it forces us into a different walking pattern. The way people walk is by stepping into their feet. They put a leg out and step into it. This is wrong, and once you recognize it, you'll see how everyone walks like this, and it's tragically comical. Like, how do we get to the point where we don't even know how to walk properly? The way we are supposed to walk is by pushing off our feet, driving our leg into the ground. You do this by activating the glute and core muscles of your body when you walk, which is why you have them, which is why we're able to walk upright. If you do this barefoot enough, you'll retrain yourself how to walk properly, and of course now you'll be the one standing out because everyone walks wrong. And the same thing is for running. If you do it barefoot enough, you'll retrain yourself how to run properly. But we're putting younger and younger kids into shoes, and this will necessitate that evolutionary change, giving us really bad bone structure and musculature, because we are shaping our bodies for an environment of sitting down and extremely flat and hard surfaces. Thankfully, we don't generally wear shoes for 24 straight hours every day for our entire lives, so the necessity of change may not be progressing that rapidly. People take advantage of this in extreme sports. They shape young would-be athletes, and they grow up to have kids, and then they do the same thing, and now this family is better at that sport genetically. This is horse and dog breeding 101. You breed based on desired traits, evolved through generational change, and boom, you suddenly have a new breed of dog or horse or cat or whatever. It didn't take 10,000 years, it took a couple generations. We are changing our eyes because of computers and phones, and we are certainly changing our diets and our digestive system. Obviously, pretty much every disease has existed and caused problems, but recently diabetes has become so widespread, it's now a fairly common genetic inheritable trait. So obviously we are doing something wrong with our lifestyle. Over 70% of Americans experience chronic stomach issues. This is going to change our evolution if we continue to eat the way we do and feed our kids this way and their kids. And humans will probably lose the ability to digest simple things like vegetables. Specifically for digestive evolution, that is mainly due to your gut microbes. So you change those, and you're necessitating of change in your gut, which is how you shape diets over a lifetime, by building or killing your gut bacteria and fungus. And with our current issues, we are killing our guts because you're introducing certain foods, and those foods are going to decide the nutrition and health of your microbiome, because only certain bacteria or fungus will live based off of your diet. And so that's going to have larger ramifications over your lifetime and through your kids if you give them the same diet and so on. But to go on this idea of inheritable traits, you're not genetically carrying some time bomb or special key code. You're training your body in your kids' body. You're morphing it. Genetic memory is still something probably considered fringe or just too understudied to really talk about, but it is observed. I believe it's usually referred to as epigenetics. I think epigenetics is rooted in microbial intelligence. What's interesting is that this necessitation of change is already proven by science, and I'm sure to the eternal regret of science, they accidentally discovered this and have done their best to play it off. And that is what is called as the placebo effect. It is intention and that necessitation of change, probably some sort of communication to microbial organisms. But the belief that a medicine or event has this significance is enough to cause change, whether positive or negative. Certain dog breeds in America are racist towards people of color or black people. Now obviously they don't have the ideological association, but they were trained to be hounds, to hunt those people. And so certain dogs, even though they aren't trained to be hounds anymore, still maintain that evolutionary change, and will probably continue to do so unless it's trained out of them, or maybe it will just fade away after a while. But that's why certain dogs will bark only at certain races of people. Somewhere down the line, they were trained to do that, and that memory or trait has been passed on. But we're supposed to be talking about humans, and the same thing is present in us. We develop many biases generationally trained into us, or develop trauma or idiosyncrasies or just random traits. Let's say you wanted to learn Spanish, but it turns out your family can't roll their R's, and neither can you. But you can practice, and you can train your tongue to roll. And now you've necessitated a change in your body. And let's say you finally learn Spanish now, being able to roll R's. And once you have a kid, you can raise them to learn Spanish from birth, and they'll pick up on that tongue rolling in no time. Your grandkid, or maybe your great-grandkid, will now have that trait of tongue rolling inherited, and will continue to do so unless your descendants decide to stop learning Spanish or stop using the tongue roll. And I think if evolution doesn't work like this, life would have died out. Any major change in the planet or ecosystem needs to be able to be reacted to rapidly, generationally training offspring to adapt through the shaping of the system and the communication to the microbiome. If you have a huge cataclysmic event, you can't spend 1,000,000 years trying to slowly evolve into a different sort of animal. You necessitate those changes rapidly and morphologically change the physiology of yourself and your offspring and so on. I've talked about this before, I think, but it's probably my favorite example to show this off, and it is in the anglerfish. Though I think this applies to all or most bioluminescent fish, but the bioluminescent part of the rod of the anglerfish is actually a symbiotic bacteria that is bioluminescent. I'm sure science will tell you about some automaton process for anglerfish to instinctually evolve a rod out of its head and mutate it to be beneficial for the mindless bacteria that also happen to randomly evolve bioluminescence in the depths of the ocean. The truth is, science has no real explanation for this. But through generational evolution and microbial intelligence, we might have some answers. Of course, this is just one really neat example, but we can apply this to everything. The fact we cannot survive without the bacteria and fungi living symbiotically with us should be enough to indicate an intentional reason to do this, not a mutation, adaptation, instinct thing. Intentional. No life can survive, and you wouldn't even have life to begin with, without microbes. You can go down a spiral slide 1,000 times and be less dizzy than merely considering the implications of microbial intelligence on human history. And kind of an important distinction to make in all of this, another blunder, I would say, of psychiatry and science, is this idea of conditioning, usually classic conditioning. This idea that you are conditioning behavior through a reward-punishment system. You're basically taking advantage of primal instincts is the explanation. Or you are communicating through behavioral patterns. And what is the difference? We'll use a dog and an owner for this. The dog needs to be trained, right? We use classical conditioning to give it a treat whenever it does the proper task. We do this with children and babies too. This is just a form of communication when there is a fundamental language barrier. The dog can't interpret your words the way you convey them any more than you can interpret its barking, at least at first. So this dog and you are trying to get along. It's tearing up your couch, so you get mad or take it outside. You punish it. When it does something right, you give it a treat. You and the dog are trying to get along and learn and live with each other. You're establishing a communication system through behavior, a language any species without a shared verbal communication system can understand over time. It's not a mindless automaton, it's learning, not being conditioned. This plays a big role because any species we domesticate end up evolving behavior, like dogs taking on more human features, or cats purring or meowing specifically for humans. Again, not something that happened through mutation over 1 million years, but intentional and recent human civilization. So evolution happens all the time in the individuals and family lines, on the microbial level and the physiological level through the necessitation of change or intentional training and passing on of knowledge and behavior, what I call generational evolution, because it happens through generations, and I believe more accurately explains jumps and symbiotic instances of evolution, as well as being able to maintain a standard evolutionary form with little to no changes over millions of years. Without necessity or intention, there is no change. Thanks for watching.